Right, I just gonna need us now to have a look at the kind of examination that was set in October 2021, October, November 2021. Right, then we're going to run a discussion based on that. Please feel free to unmute yourself so that we can have a dialogue. Right, so that we can have a dialogue. I need to understand what some of your thoughts are, where we are missing each other, and where we are in agreement, most important. All right, so let's see, let's get to the questions. All right, so question one, explain. So our paper, by the way, let's just have a look at the instructions. Our paper is 2 hours, so we expect to be done. Now, the submission time, last time it was cut up to 30 minutes, right? It was cut by half. It used to be an hour, and they shut it all out to 30 minutes, which is still not bad. So which means my advice is that you should be starting to submit at least the last 15 minutes of the 30 minutes, right? At least if you are going to be struggling with your network, then at least you have got 15 minutes to work it out. Let's say, I think 15 minutes is more than enough. But an ideal situation, of course, is that you are done writing in 2 hours, and then you begin your submission from the beginning of the 30 minutes that's counted. Right, and then of course, if you are going to be typing, they prefer this font here, which is going to be Arial 12. Right, they prefer that. And usually the line spacing is 1.5. So if you are going to be typing, then you can do that. I sometimes think handwriting is a bit quicker though. I feel like handwriting can be a little bit quicker. So if you can handwrite, the better. Typing made a lot of sense, like in the 2021 situation here, where we're basically not required to draw any graphs. So it would make a lot of sense for you to type. But now that we are handwriting, it's okay. Either way, I'm cool with any of those situations. So if you're gonna type, make sure therefore that if you're gonna type and then you hand draw the diagram, be in a good position to paste it on your Word document, on your Microsoft Word document. So you just take a picture with your phone, and then I don't know how you do it, but how they've done it, I normally have my WhatsApp here on the laptop, so I'll basically just send the picture maybe to my other number or to somebody else, and then download it to the laptop, and then I simply paste it onto the Word document. Right, so explain with reference to a graph the effect of adverse supply shocks in an economy. Refer to the graph in the prescribed book, right? So you do not, or you did not have to draw the graph under these circumstances, but here we will, of course, have to draw the graph if this is to be set, if this is to be done in the 2023 setup, right? Okay, so I've got my textbook here on the side, so I'm gonna refer to the textbook and then we'll discuss what this is. All right, but basically, just to fill you in on this, when we talk of adverse supply shocks in the context of your, and if you're gonna be looking at this in the context of your ADAS curve, which is the aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve, you are basically looking at a sharp shift on your supply curve, which is a sharp shift to the left in particular. So by definition, we'll be referring to a certain decrease in your supply, right? A certain decrease in your supply. So it could be caused by a number of factors, right? A number of factors could come into play that could result in this. I think a recent example that we had of an adverse supply shock could have been the COVID situation. Think about that situation, that the borders were closed, and in the local economy that could easily constitute an adverse supply shock, right? Where suddenly we don't have supply, right? There's a limitation in our supply or in our production, whatever the case may be. All right, so we are gonna check that out. That we can check, I believe. Let's go to, we can be able to see that on chapter 19. Right, let's have a look at that. on chapter 19, right? Where we are dealing with our AD and AS curve. Right? So we are going to discuss the graph that we see there. Let's see which one this is. All right. Nope. I think the first parts basically deal with the derivation of those curves. So this is what we have now, but now this one basically shows long run growth, right? And what would happen for our long run, the supply curve to shift in that direction, right? This, I believe, is an effect of this shock, this supply shock. Right, so if you have a look at what's happening here, the initial starting point is going to be, we have our short run aggregate supply curve here, right? Intersecting the aggregate demand curve there, and then this is our equilibrium point. It's that price here over there. Right, so an adverse supply shock would basically shift the short run aggregate supply curve to the left, right, sharply to the left. So which means we can be looking at a situation where this is shifting straight up to this one here, which is a short run aggregate supply curve 1 there. Right, and as it gets there, assuming that at this point we don't have any movement on the aggregate demand curve, our new equilibrium is going to be that point there. Right, this is going to be our new equilibrium there. So obviously, when this happens, there's a recession, right? And this kind of recession has a special name, if you remember it. They call this one stagflation, where your GDP is low and your price levels are high. But in any case, it is a recession. All recessions behave the same way, right? We have got, we basically have our GDP down there, right? So what happens now is when there's a recession, right? When there's a recession, over time, the aggregate supply curve, which is the short run aggregate supply curve, tends to end up shifting to the right, right? Because whenever there's a recession, prices are going to fall. I think if you, in some instances, you could relate with what happened during the COVID situation. Certain prices of inputs were going down, right? I don't know if you guys remember, if you guys were following the stocks at that time, particularly the oil prices went below negative. If you guys remember that well, oil was at an all-time low. It was trading low. So that's the case there. So when that happens now, it means the short-run aggregate supply curve is basically shifting to the right, which is an indication of the drop in those prices. If you're looking for a place to rent at that time, you could have noticed also that the prices have generally gone down. Why so? When there is obviously when there is a certain shift of this aggregate supply curve to the left, it indicates again a reduction in demand. There's going to be a fall in demand. Usually, the response to a fall in demand is that the prices need to adjust and go down. This is the adjustment process where this is moving now from short run aggregate supply curve 1 to aggregate supply curve 2. So which means you end up now having a new equilibrium there, which is E2, right? E2. And at this point, because this is an adjustment process from E1 to E2, it basically also indicates your new natural level of GDP or natural level of income, which is basically going to be represented by that point there. Right? So it should have therefore started off there, and then the shift went through to this one here, to a new natural level, and then after the adjustment, this is where come now. All right, so as we try now, say, to put some bolsters on our economy, to spruce it up a little bit, we might then want to employ an expansionary policy, right? We might want to put in an expansionary policy there. So which is where now you are going to see a movement from AD to AD1, which is a movement from An expansionary policy basically is demand management, right? It's demand management. So as you do that, you are basically shifting your demand curve from there to there. That's what you want to do, right? That's basically what you want to do there, right? But in any case, that is short-lived, right? That is short-lived because now we can't exactly grow in the long term beyond our long-term aggregate supply curve. So our long-term aggregate supply curve basically represents the maximum that we can get to as an economy. So in terms of our production, we can't go beyond that. Should we go beyond that, it's just a temporary flex, but we will still go back to the long-run aggregate supply curve. So because now there has been a drop in the natural level of income, this is going to be our new equilibrium, right? That's where we'll get to. So you will realize now, like over and above what's discussed here, you will realize now that as you are implementing an expansionary policy there to try, you are basically trying to push the economy up. Right? You are basically trying to push the economy up. But it's unfortunate now, the economy cannot grow beyond the long run aggregate supply curve. There are circumstances, of course, under which that can move to the right. Circumstances which will include, say, maybe improvement in technologies, etc. This is going to be like your PPF, right? Your product possibility frontier. Right? You will not go beyond that. Anything beyond that is impossible. It's just temporary. You see. So you will realize that any kind of demand management now, it will only achieve increasing prices, raising inflation, right? But it will not be effective as far as improvement in the GDP is concerned. Right? It will not be effective. But why this can happen actually in the real sense is because remember, at any given point, we are not really aware of what the long run aggregate supply curve is or where it is. We don't really know the position. It's just an assumption here. This is theory. So in terms of theory, we could always discuss this in theory. But when you are dealing with an actual scenario now where this is a country that we need to deal with, and then there's been a situation now, a COVID situation, how would you come out of that COVID situation? Then we saw our own government's response where they were lowering the interest rates. So we assume that lowering the interest rates is basically going to boost the economy. How so? Because your 80 cap is going to move from 80 to 81. So ideally, the new level of equilibrium in terms of the income, the new level of income should be somewhere there, right, which is higher than the initial one, right, after the COVID situation. But if it's a situation now where we have reached our full potential in terms of income, then the only thing that this is going to achieve is basically taking us back there. Right? Basically going to take us back there. You see, so which means our end point is going to be a situation where we are on the natural level of employment, or which is the natural level of GDP or income, but at a higher price. Maybe this could be pretty much what we are experiencing here, because we see the prices are higher, but we don't quite see a corresponding level of income. We don't quite see that. Maybe that could be the situation, right? Who knows? Right, but that's basically it there. Right? That's basically it. So in terms of this question now, with reference to a graph, explain effect of adverse shocks in the economy. Right? Explain the effect of adverse shocks. So what you can eliminate now, if you're going to be drawing this graph yourself, then you can basically eliminate the explanation where you are putting in an expansionary policy, because I believe this part of the question simply looks at the effect of an adverse supply shock, right? So which means the only things that you are going to be looking at now is your movement from there to there and then to there, right? That's what you are basically going to be looking at. So your description, therefore, you talk about maybe a certain increase in the price of a special input that we use. Normally, it's going to be oil, right? Normally, it's going to be oil. So suppose the price of oil has sharply gone up, right? So this is going to result in your movement from SRAS, that one, to SRAS1 there. Then as a result of that recession, prices are going to be low, right? Prices are going to adjust and go down as a result of the inflation. Then from there, you are going to move to SRAS2, that one. So that's going to be your end point there. Right? So about of the AD curve, we don't really have to talk about that because the question is not mentioned about any response from the government. Right? Had the question said, okay, and the subsequent response from the government, then you would include expansionary policies that are meant to correct the recession. All right, so this is just 10 marks. So which means you just draw the graph and then you explain the movements of the graph. So it's nice, of course, to add gestural explanations. Like you see the way I'm talking about it. Try and include oil prices, like things that are relatable, right? Things that we could relate with as the economy. Talk about what could have happened during the COVID situation. So that could clearly have resulted in adverse supply shocks in the different economies. Right. I think in the one class the other time we were talking about a situation, particularly the COVID situation. I think we're dealing with ECS 3701 in terms of the monetary policy. So we're basically talking about the effectiveness of the monetary policy, and then we're saying how effective is our monetary policy in terms of first of all, the monetary policy was there to boost the GDP, right, as a result of the temporary recession that we had. So the natural response of the government was therefore to put in demand management, right? So of which we saw our own government implementing some fiscal policy measures, and then Reserve Bank as well came in with reduction in the interest rates. I think that one we saw. But in that particular class now, we're discussing the effectiveness of that policy in terms of what you see every day. How effective was this? Right? In terms of, do you think it actually changed? Do you think it actually served its purpose in terms of improving the economy? And then, if that's the case, did it also? Because I think later you could have realized that they then implemented a stringent policy, a stringent monetary policy to try and tame the inflation. But what effect did it have in terms of employment? Was there a corresponding growth in the GDP and a reduction in the unemployment? So if there wasn't, then it's likely that this was the case that we're dealing with, right? It's highly likely that this was the case that we're dealing with. All right. So which is the case of stagflation. All right, let's move on to the next question. Right, question number 2. Explain the J curve and how it happens. You can refer to the relevant graph in the prescribed book. So, like I said, we might have to draw this one, right? We might have to draw this one in terms of if we are writing this in 2023, we will have to draw the J curve. All right. J curve should be somewhere here, right? Let's see. I think we did the J curve last week. We did the J curve last week. This is very nice, by the way. Please make sure that you are able to explain this. I predict that this might just come out in the exam. Right. And of course, an explanation of the Marshall-Lerner condition would do you good. Right. This is the J curve. Right. This is the J curve. So back to the question, explain the J curve and how it happens. So under what circumstances do we have the J curve? So the J curve basically describes an effect or the effect of a devaluation or depreciation in a country's currency, right, over time. You know, what happens over time. So that's what a J curve basically describes here. It's important again to take note of the fact that the J curve works, right? works when the Marshall-Lerner condition applies, right? When the Marshall-Lerner condition applies. So what is the Marshall-Lerner condition? Marshall-Lerner condition basically talks about the effect of this devaluation, the devaluation of the currency, how that affects our exports and our imports. So the Marshall-Lerner condition basically states that a devaluation of a currency will in the end lead to, will in the end or should in the end, right? Under what circumstances? So the circumstances are that a devaluation of the currency is going to ideally make our exports cheaper and our imports more expensive. So as a result of that, exports are expected to increase, and then imports are expected to decrease. So which means the trade balance is expected to improve, right? So this is basically going to be shown in the J curve. Yeah, this is basically shown in the J curve. So the effect of that devaluation over time. So what's important now about the J curve is, first of all, I want to talk about the initial deterioration of the balance. And we spoke about this last time, and we said deterioration is basically caused by the fact that the response is not immediate. Right? The response is not immediate. And we spoke about long-term contracts. And we even went on to mention situations where our production processes basically require, I think I mentioned the issue of France there, what's happening with the French, and then some of the raw materials that they need here in Africa. So if it's an instance now that we are dealing with this from France's perspective, and we are the French in this scenario, then if there is a sharp increase now, right, if there is a sharp increase in the price of an input as a result of the devaluation of our currency, right? Remember, we said it basically makes our imports more expensive, and it's a kind of import that we can hardly do without. So in other words, our demand for that import is inelastic, right? Our demand for that import is inelastic. So it means the price changes, but the quantity demanded is not going to change in the same manner. Right? So we are still going to demanding that sort of commodity in relatively high quantities as before. Right. So when that happens now, there's going to be an initial deterioration there as a result of that. But with time, we expect that to correct, and then eventually we get to a trade surplus. So this is what this is about there. So will first result in a deterioration of the nation's trade balance before showing a net improvement. So after time is. So after this point here, then there's going to be a surplus. There's going to be a surplus at that point. So if you look at countries like South Africa, we are normally big. Most of our developing countries, most of these developing countries, particularly third world countries, we are very big in the financial markets, right, and quite small in the when it comes to the current account. We are quite small. We are not doing much manufacturing here. We are not doing much manufacturing here. So which is why we normally have a trade deficit. Right? We normally run a trade deficit. But that of course is going to be catered for by the surplus in the financial market. That's what keeps us in balance. But if you look at countries like China, right, big manufacturers like China, it's in their best interest to keep their currencies low, to keep their currencies devalued, so that they can be able to sell what they are manufacturing, right? Because they are basically competing against the rest of the world. So this is where the United States at some point was suffering, right? Because of their strong currency. We're not importing much, or many countries were not importing much from the United States as a result of their strong currency. So most countries were then looking east, importing from China. So that's why production in China grew. They had very smart leaders. Grew. If you're running a country like our country, then you might want to increase interest rates, maybe, right? You might want to increase the interest rate so you can bring in development, and your development is coming through FDI, foreign direct investment. Right? That's where we come in there. All right, let's jump to the next question. Question number 3. The balance of payments always balances in an accounting sense, and thus there can never be balance of payment problems. Evaluate the statement. All right, evaluate the statement. All right, so I'm being interrupted here. I hope. All right, so the answer to this one here is actually on the notes that I sent. So the balance of payment always balances, right? So in terms of your description here, you're going to be looking at why your balance of payment balances in the accounting sense. Right? We talk about the issue of the credit end. So every time there is a credit, there must be a corresponding debit. So it will always balance. And when it doesn't balance, by the way, we say it, there's a special portion that we include there to make it balance, of which we say that's called unreported item. So that's added to ensure that it's balancing. Right? But now when we talk of balance of payment problems now, we are now referring to the issues of a surplus and the issues of a deficit in either of those accounts. So that's all on the notes there on the balance of payment note. So you're looking at what are the problems that arise as a result of the surplus. So which means what this means to say is the fact that it's balancing here, right? The fact that the balance of payments will balance because it's an accounting concept. All your credits will always equal all your debits. It does not necessarily mean that you are having an equilibrium in your trading or in your current account or having an equilibrium in your financial account, right? So it means that there could be imbalances in either of those accounts while your balance of payments is balancing. So we said equilibriums are when you have a surplus or when you have a deficit. So you're basically identifying the problems associated with the surplus and then the problems associated with a deficit in either of those accounts. So that's what we're basically doing there for 15 marks. All right. And then, so all that there is in the notes. All right. And then name and explain the most extreme form of a fixed exchange rate system. So which is the one that is short of adopting a common currency or dollarization. So one that is short of that. All right. So because this one we haven't done, so I prepared a solution for this one, which I'm gonna put up now in just a second. Right. So this is also adopted from the textbook. So I'm just gonna take us through that one, and then from there we will. I'm gonna post it in the group there. I'm gonna post it in the group. All right. So I'm just trying to share that one. All right. I think you should be able to see it any moment from now. So what happens now? Maybe let me first talk about dollarization. Let me keep it at that one there. Let me just talk about dollarization because maybe some of you are not familiar with dollarization, what this is about. Right? I know it's not the issue here, but we're talking about something that is quite short of dollarization, which is just a step lower than dollarization. With dollarization, usually the local currency fails, and then we decide to adopt a currency that is more stable, and of which in most cases the currency that's going to be stable or that's usually stable is United States dollar. So hence we refer to this as dollarization. But it could basically work with any currency. Right? You know, for instance, in Namibia they are using rands. In Namibia they are using rands. I think it is still rands, but last time I checked they were using rands. Because, all right, other than the fact that it was colonized by South Africa a couple of years back, this is the situation now where the currency, the Namibian currency is fading. They could adopt the South African rand. right? As long as the South African rand is presumed to be stable, right? So in these circumstances, usually the currency is failing, right? The currency is losing a lot of value, right? The currency is losing a lot of value, and there's hyperinflation usually in those circumstances. Then we decide that let's put in another currency that people trust. So remember that the monies that we deal with is referred to as fiat currency, right? Fiat currency. It's based on trust, right? It's not backed by anything. Currency that we are using. Most currencies around the world are basically not backed by anything, right? So it's just backed by our trust in the system, right? So when our trust in the system fails, it means the value of that currency ideally fails as well. It falls, right? So hence now we might want to bring in a currency that we trust a little bit more than our own currency. So it will be different. It will be a little bit different if, let's say, the currency is based on the gold standard. So in those circumstances, the value hardly falls, right? Because it's backed by gold, right? But it's not the case. Hence, our cabinet. All right. So now we are dealing with a currency board arrangement now in this particular question. So the most extreme form of a fixed exchange rate system, short of adopting a common currency or dollarization, is currency board arrangement. The currency board arrangement is a strict and inflexible monetary system that commits a country's central bank to change its domestic currency for a specific currency at a fixed rate and holds foreign exchange 100% or more of its monetary base. You see now that this is very much hectic, right? This is very much hectic. So number one, you are basically going to fix your exchange rate now against a certain currency, right? We are going to hold it, fix it against a certain currency. And then to back that up, obviously, I think we discussed this when we were talking about those graphs there. We were saying, we're basically saying, right, sorry, I'm being interrupted here. Right, we're basically saying, if you are dealing with, if you are going to be dealing with a situation where a currency has devalued or a currency has appreciated, and you don't like that as a central bank and you wish to correct that, so we're saying you need to have sufficient reserves, right? You need to have sufficient reserves. For instance, if there's an oversupply of the United States dollar, means that our currency is appreciating against the United States dollar, and the dollar is depreciating because it's been oversupplied. And if we don't like that, then we must have enough money in terms of our local currency to buy off the United States dollar, to buy it off the market, so that we keep the price at a certain level, right? And then if something opposite that is true, if the United States dollar has become right, then it means we must have reserves, enough reserves to supply to the market so that we keep the price at a certain level. So this is what's happening here now. So we are saying it commits a country's central bank to exchange its domestic currency for a specific currency at a fixed rate, right? And hold the foreign reserves equal to 100% or more. So how can you keep it fixed? So you can be able to keep it fixed if you have got enough reserves of that currency. So it means you can play around with the currency in the market. Fixed exchange rate. So this is how this is going to work. So under a currency board, the exchange rate system between the countries or between the domestic currency and the chosen foreign currency is fixed and it's not going to fluctuate, right? So this fixed rate is typically set at par, meaning that 1 unit of the domestic currency is exchanged for 1 unit of foreign currency. So let me give an example of where a situation like this failed because of not having adequate foreign currency reserves. So not so long ago in Zimbabwe, after the currency failed, right, after the collapse of the dollar, right, the Zimbabwean dollar. They went into dollarization, though it was unofficial, right? But the country had to move into dollarization. But in that instance, it was a multi-currency system now, where you could not just use the dollar. Okay, you could not only use the dollar, but the rand was available, the dollar was available. But up until I think the then president of Botswana, Ian Khama, who was not in good books with the then president of Zimbabwe, which was Robert Mugabe, they were not in good books, so they could not sustain the pula. Right? So which means they used South African rand and United States dollar concurrently. Right? So in those circumstances, now I think Robert Mugabe and Thabo Mbeki and as well as Jacob Zuma were very good friends. So they are very good friends of the ANC anyway. So that system could be sustained, right? So there was dollarization. Now, up until a time where it could function for a while because there was a unity government at that point. So because the country is under sanctions with the United States dollar, with the United States under sanctions as a result of the United States and the European Union, it was quite strange that the United States dollar could be used for that long period of time. But it's obviously because since there was a unity government, which was a global political agreement, as they called it then, and then part of the friends of the United States government were also in government there. So it was a power sharing agreement that was there. So hence they could at least sustain United States dollar. So now what would happen during that particular time? The civil servants and everybody else were basically earning United States dollar now. So it was basically functioning. So that basically recovered the economy, the monetary sector. So as you know, that inflation was referred to as hyperinflation there. So it normalized, prices were not going up anymore. So at the end of that era now, because the global political arrangement lapsed, right? And then they went into an election now and they had to elect a new government, right? And of which the current ruling party did win again. The enemies of the West, which are the enemies of the United States, did win again. So which means that whole dollarization now could not be sustained easily, right? It could not be sustained, right? Because you can't use a country's currency without their permission, right? But now, then the government had to reintroduce the Zimbabwean dollar again. So how did they do that now? They called it the bond note. They called them the bond currency, right? They called those ones the bond currency. And then the Reserve Bank pegs that bond currency at an exchange rate of 1:1 with the United States dollar. They basically pegged it at 1:1. So they basically brought in a new currency and they simply said this currency is worth at $1 is worth $1 of this Zimbabwean currency. But this is why, now here's the reason why this could not be sustained. It's because the government, in so doing, did not have enough reserves of United States dollar to sustain that. Then, given, of course, that there's a lot of distrust in the local currency there, and people are going to migrate or, move towards the foreign currency, right? So which means now there's a situation where you are trying to buy something from someone and then they tell you that, no, I prefer foreign currency, please buy this using the United States dollar. So what effect does that have now on the market? It means that people are basically disowning the local currency. So it means that the local currency is going to continue losing value and the United States dollar is gaining value. Why? Because it means the United States dollar is scarce, right, compared to the local currency. So hence people are moving towards what is scarce, right, because it seems more valuable now. So, which means the response of the government now should have been, therefore, to oversupply the United States currency, right, to flood the market with the United States currency. So, which is what we are talking about now in terms of once you are going to fix your exchange rate, you don't just wake up in the morning and say, this is worth 1:1. You need to have measures, right? You need to be ready to step in to implement measures that can keep it there. right? So which means if you have got tons and tons of reserves in foreign currency, then once there is a slight drop in the domestic currency and a slight appreciation in the foreign currency, then you pump in the United States dollar, right? You pump it in, and when that happens, the forex is going to normalize, right? It's going to be fixed. So which is what we are talking about now, which is full backing with foreign reserves. So the central bank of the country implementing the currency board holds foreign currency reserves equal to or in excess of 100% of the monetary base. So what is the monetary base? Basically, our total currency in circulation plus the reserves, right? So in some cases, the backing can exceed, or it should, in any case advisable, it should exceed 100% so that we can have an extra layer of security, you see. So you are basically playing around with the markets now. Automatic convertibility. So the central bank is required to automatically convert domestic currency into foreign currency and vice versa at a fixed exchange rate. So what does this mean now? So if, as a government, you are going to say the United States dollar is worth $1 Zimbabwean dollar, then it means if I come to you now with $1 Zimbabwean dollar, then you should be able to give me $1 US automatically. So what was happening now with the Zimbabwean government, they will tell you stories now when you deposit your money in the bank and it's in US dollars. And then now you want to withdraw US dollars. They tell you stories and they want to give you local currency. So that basically brings distrust in the market, right? So which is why the local currency will start devaluing or depreciating once people are seeing such tendencies from the government, you see. So you are basically now showing us that you also don't have foreign currency. So it means what you're communicating to the markets is that foreign currency is scarce. So hence the value of foreign currency is going to keep going up. See? So it means at any given time, I should deposit the local currency and withdraw the foreign currency. So that's the circumstance for that to work. And then, of course, there's going to be limited monetary policy independence. The currency board system will have, of course, severe restrictions, right? So we are not going to be independent in those circumstances. So you cannot print more domestic currency unless you have equivalent amount of foreign currency. So what happens if you are printing more of domestic currency? Then you are flooding the markets with domestic currency. So you want to force domestic currency now to depreciate because there's going to be an oversupply of that. So the only reason why you can do that now is if you can match it with foreign currency reserves, right? And then, of course, you must have discipline and credibility. Credibility, I already spoke about. Right? You must be a man of your word, right? You can't say this is the exchange rate and then when I come, you don't have the money available. So you are not credible anymore. Right, so currency board is designed to instill discipline in a country's monetary and fiscal policies. So it forces the government to maintain a balanced budget and prevents inflationary practices, of course. So you can't willy-nilly spend. Right? So remember, sometimes these governments, when we're going on campaigns now, elections are coming, we are going on campaigns, we might untwist the Reserve Bank, right? If we don't have that independence between the government and the central bank. We might force the central bank to print money, right? So which is these fiscal policies. Because elections are coming now, we want to build houses for people. Right? Where is the money coming from? We are the government, we run the central bank, we can simply print money, right? And hire people to do that. But at the end of the day, what effect does that have? We already saw that by printing money, we are oversupplying domestic currency. You see. An external anchor, the foreign currency token for the currency board serves as an external anchor, right? As it is often stable and a trusted currency like the United States dollar or the euro. Now we don't have again the situation where the central bank is the lender of last resort. We don't have that anymore. Right. So I'm gonna print this and it's available. Make it available for us. Right. It's after 8 now. I think we can conclude the session. Right. I do not know if we have any questions.